Hi. I thought today I'd talk about dialogue. It should be easy, right? We all talk all the time. It's just conversation. It should be easy to write dialogue. Some people do find it easy. They find that it's the way into their writing, it's the way they find a voice. But for a lot of writers, it ties us in knots. And I think that's because some people do confuse dialogue with conversation. Conversation is not the same thing. Conversation keeps channels of communications open. It's full of meanders and repetitions and deviations and ums and ers and looping back on itself and tangents and all sorts of things. And we all have our own style of conversation, some more infuriating than others. But dialogue contains a very clear agenda because it's there to move the story along. It's there to show your character's development and show how they're moving through the story. And so it has to be much leaner and sharper than a normal conversation. In fact, Anne Lamott, who wrote Bird by Bird, which I thoroughly recommend, she says dialogue should be more interesting and concise and even more true than what is actually said. Dialogue is more like a movie than it is like real life, since it should be more dramatic. Good dialogue must be sharp and lean and should give us the sense that we're eavesdropping. So, good dialogue encompasses both what is said and what is not said. And I love that, particularly that last comment. It makes me think of a particular scene in the BBC drama of Sally Rooney's Normal People, where Marianne and Connor meet at a party after years of not seeing one another. And I don't know if you know the novel. I thoroughly recommend it in terms of a study on dialogue. Sally Rooney is extremely good at that sharp and lean, and she's also very good at the what is not said in between the lines. Anyway, in this scene in the TV drama, Marianne previously has been the weaker character, really. Connor's been the one in control. Marianne hasn't enjoyed school. She's got a very difficult home life. And she has almost sort of lent on Connor, really. And they meet at this party. They're at university at Trinity Dublin. And she has suddenly found her stride. She's in her milieu. She understands how that world works. And Connor is the one who is the fish out of water. And in this scene, they literally meet across a crowded room, and you can see the excitement in their eyes and hear the excitement in their voices that they're seeing one another again. And there's the possibility, perhaps, of them getting together again from being apart for a while. And the conversation has an incredible shape to it because after the initial excitement of seeing one another, there's a bit of a reproach over the fact they've split up. And then there's this beat in the middle where they realise that they are made for one another, but neither of them actually wants to say it. I really heartily recommend that you watch it if you haven't done. Normal People on BBC iPlayer, if you've got that facility to watch. But if you can't watch it, do read her novels because they are so sharp on dialogue. The other thing that I've found really useful when thinking about editing dialogue is the phrase table dusting, which I borrowed from John Yorke's book Into the Woods, which I'm always recommending. He also is a screenwriter. And although I write novels, I find so many tips from screenwriting are extremely useful when it comes particularly to editing novels because of the economy of writing that is needed for screenwriting. When I was adapting the Paddington movie into a novel, it was so interesting to see how the dialogue said it all. Of course it did, because that's what the movie is. It's all dialogue, really. But of course, writing a novel, I had to fill in the visuals that you get with a movie because you can't see those in a book. But it was very, very useful exercise to do something the other way around for me. Look at dialogue first and then make it into a novel. Anyway, going back to John Yorke, there you go. Conversation loops around, doesn't always follow a particular pattern like dialogue does. In John Yorke's book, Into the Woods, he talks about get rid of table dusting. And what he means by that is don't have these awful expositional bits of dialogue where you bring characters in to tell the reader stuff that they should be able to just glean from beautifully crafted plot, dialogue, and characterization. And the phrase table dusting comes from sort of 19th century plays when servants would come on in between the scenes and dust the table and say, "Oh, isn't it awful that Lord Farquhar's having an affair with Lady so-and-so? I saw them down in the park, da, 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 da." And it's just filling in, and it's exposition, and it's really clunky, and it makes the reader feel as if they're just being preached to somehow. So everything that needs to be shown should be there in the dialogue, should play out in the action, and everything should be there for its own sake and for the sake of the story, and not just for the sake of the words or the dialogue itself. Sometimes in writing a first draft, my characters will argue with each other, and they're just so infuriating in my head. I have to get it all down, even though I know that most of it is going to be cut, because I have to let them talk to one another to find out what the point is of the conversation. So really what I'm saying is, when it comes to editing, think about the purpose of each bit of dialogue in the same way that when you're plotting a scene, think about the beats, think about the story arc. Dialogue is not conversation. It does not meander. It does not go off on tangents. It is very much there to serve your plot. And if you can remember that, you will craft really good dialogue.